So McCrae and Costa also talk about the unit of the five factors theory. Basically, here they try to explain how a person's trait is developed, whether trait is biologically based or environmentally based, and what are the consequences of the traits, basically. So in McCrae and Costa's personality theory, behavior is predicted through an understanding of three core components and three peripheral components. And here we will talk about both three core components and three peripheral components, how they correlate to each other. So the three core components of personality include the basic tendencies, characteristic adaptations, and the self-concept. And you can see it from this figure. Yeah, in this figure, the first let's try to understand what are uh, the elements in this figure. In this figure, the main components are depicted with rectangles. So you can see here the basic tendencies, characteristic adaptations, and self-concept are all depicted in with rectangles. Yeah. So it means that they are the core components of the personality. And then the peripheral components are represented by the elliptical shapes, yeah, the ellipse. So you can see here there are three peripheral components, the biological basis, the objective biography, and external influences. And then the arrows, yeah, each of the arrows, they describe the dynamic processes and also indicate the direction of causal influences, so how one cause each other. So here, for example, the arrow between biological basis and the basic tendency, it means that biological basis is the cause or the cause of the basic tendencies, and then basic tendencies are the cause of characteristic adaptations, and then characteristic adaptations cause the objective biography, and so on. So, for example, the objective biography or the life experience is the result of the characteristic adaptation as well as the external influences, because you can see the arrow is pointing from characteristic adaptations to the objective biography. At the same time, there is also an arrow that points from the external influences to the objective biography. At the same time, also there is an arrow that points from the objective biography to the external influences. It means that both are actually influencing each other. And then we can see here that the biological basis are the only causes of the basic tendencies. So basic tendencies basically are the personality traits. You can see here the five basic tendencies include the neuroticism, extroversion, openness to experience, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. And then also McCrae and Costa uh, suggest that personality systems can be interpreted by how the system works at a certain time. Yeah, right now, for example, how the system works at this current time. So, um, everything. So our personality is basically at this current time is being developed in a certain way, yeah, or in a longitudinal way, how we evolve over time. So we also there is a kind of like evolution in our personality, over time. There are changes, but whether it's a big change or not so much, yeah, so that depends. Yeah, that depends. We'll talk about that later. And each cause is dynamic, that meaning that it's always changing over time. However, yeah, the biological base, the biological basis uh, uh, the biological base, the influence of biological bases to the basic tendencies is not a dynamic process because biological base is the only causal factor of the basic tendencies. There's nothing else. And then this arrow that the circle arrow, yeah, there's why there's the arrow that comes to itself in characteristic adaptations because this is when we adapt in the form of avoiding new experiences due to discomfort in the past. So maybe we experience something new, but we don't want to adapt to change our behavior based on that new situations because maybe there was a comfort in the past. Maybe we remember that in the past, well, maybe some traumatic experiences, or maybe in the past when we behave in certain way in that particular situation that's similar to the new experience, we felt maybe dissatisfied, or we felt some we experienced some negative emotions and something like that. So that's when the dynamic processes comes to itself in terms in the characteristic adaptation. So let's talk about each of the components. So in the core components, the first core component is the basic tendencies. So the basic tendencies, as we have seen from the figure, it's caused by biological factors. So the basic tendencies may be inherited, folded by early experience, or modified by psychological illness or intervention, but at any time, a basic tendencies determines the potential and direction of those people. So it's basically it's stable. So basic tendencies are uh, the stable component of our personality traits. So yeah, the essence of the basic tendencies is its biological basis and its stability over time and motion. So it's basically stable across time and across context and situation. And then the next core component of personality is the self-concept. So self-concept is actually a characteristic adaptation, but it has its own box because according to McCrae and Costa, it is a very important adaptation. So we basically develop our self-concept through the characteristic adaptations, but the way we view ourselves, the knowledge that we have about ourselves, uh, affects how we behave in any situations. So self-concept includes knowledge, views, and self-evaluation. It's ranging from various facts in the personal history to an identity that provides a sense of purpose and coherence in life. The beliefs, attitudes, and feelings that a person has about themselves is an adaptation of the characteristics that affect how a person will act in a particular situation. McCrae and Costa also combines personal myths as part of one self-concept. So we have, myths about ourselves. We have myths about other things that we believe, um, that we believe ourselves. So that also influence the way we see ourselves. So that's considered as part of our self-concept. And then the peripheral components consisted of biological basis, the objective biography, and external influences. We can see here again they are represented in the elliptical shapes, the biological basis, objective biography, and external influences. As we have learned before, biological basis is the single influence, the sole cause of the personality traits. So it's a single influence on personality is biological factors in the form of genes, hormones, and brain structures. It does not mean that environment does not contribute at all to the formation of personality, but the influence of environment towards the personality traits is not as direct as the biological factors. And we have just discussed before about the characteristic adaptation. So that's basically why it's very important to distinguish between the basic tendencies and the characteristic adaptations, um, because basic tendencies uh, is, so the personality traits is influenced by biological factors, but at the same time, it can also be influenced by environmental influences uh, that affects the way we adjust, that affects the characteristic adaptation. So characteristic adaptation is the one that is caused by the environmental influences. Yeah, the second peripheral component is the objective biography. It's everything that someone does, thinks, and feels across the whole lifespan. Basically, our autobiography, every single thing. So it emphasizes what happens to one's life, so objectively what happens to us, and not about our perception, yeah, of the experience. So not our subjective perception, because we might experience something that's not maybe experience something that's uh, normal or for other people, but because it has a particular relevance to us, we become to be emotionally uh, attached or felt some experience some negative emotions due to that. So we believe that that particular experience, subjectively we believe that that particular experience is a very sad experience, while actually objectively other people don't think the same way. So it emphasizes on what actually happens to one's life. um, any behavior or response becomes part of the cumulative record. So basically, if we can see a film about ourselves since we were born, this is the objective biography. So like what happened, what we did, what we think, we feel across our lifespan. That's called the objective biography. So the third peripheral component is the external influence. So everyone is constantly in a physical or social situation that can affect their personality system. So as of right now, you might be sitting in your cos in your room or in your living room. That's and with a chair or with a desk or lying down on your bed. That's a physical situation or a social situation, right? Yeah, maybe right now you are talking to your friends through WhatsApp or uh, someone outside of your room, maybe your parents or maybe your other close friends are, like they are talking to each other, or they also talk to you from outside, like, hey, what are you doing inside your room? Are you studying? There's a social situation there that can affect our personality. External influences, according to McCrae and Costa, are about how one responds to the opportunities and demands of the context, whether it's physical or social. These responses are a function of the characteristic adaptations, how we adjust to that new situation, and its interaction. So with the objective biography, so between external influences and in the objective biography, they are interacting with each other, so they influence each other. So external influence will affect our objective biography, and our what we do, what we think, and what we feel might also affect how the external uh, the environment affects how we feel and what we think. It's sort of like yeah, so mutual interaction, yeah, mutual cause. They are causing each other. So in the five factor theory, McCrae and Costa also proposed some basic or core postulates about each of the personality components, that because the basic tendencies and characteristic adaptations are basically the most important components of the personality. So we were talking about the core postulates for basic tendencies and characteristic adaptations only. So there are four core postulates for basic tendencies. First, that uh, relates to the individuality. So each adult has a unique combination of the uh, neo-AC. Yeah, so neuroticism, extroversion, openness to experience, agreeableness, and conscientiousness trait patterns. And the uniqueness is due to the genotype variation in each person. So if we compare between ourselves and our friends or other people, we will have different combinations. So someone might be moderate uh, in N, but high in E and low in O, and moderate in A, high in C, and other people might have different patterns. So it's very unique. Yeah, so basic tendencies are the unique component, or if we want to say it in Carol's word, the unique traits, yeah, of our personality. And then the second core postulate for basic tendencies is related to its origin, as we have discussed previously just now. Yeah, the origin of uh, all personality is solely the result of endogenous or internal forces such as genetics, hormonal, and brain structures. So the biological factors. And again, the family environment does not play a role in forming basic tendencies. Again, remember that yes, it does not uh, influence the basic tendencies, but it might, yeah, influence the characteristic adaptation and the other components. So it does not, again, the environment does not influence basic tendencies, only biological factors, but does not mean that nurture or the environment does not play any role at all in forming our personality. And then the third core postulate for basic tendencies is related to development. So McCrae and Costa believe that trait develops and changes during the childhood and slows its progression in adolescence. So it's becoming, across time, it's becoming to be more stable. And in early and middle adulthood, around the age 30, personality changes can be said to have stopped. So it's becoming more, it's becoming stable, absolute, during the 30s. That's what McCrae and Costa say. And then the last core postulate for basic tendency is the structure. So we can say that this is five-factor theory. The structure of personality consisted of the five and only five factors, not less than that and not more than that. And that traits are organized hierarchically from narrow and specific to broad and general. So basically, the five factors are the more general. And for example, neuroticism, there is like anxiety, and like, yeah, the anxiety and uh, tension, like in this underneath the um, neuroticism itself. So it's from the general to a specific. Yeah, that's how the factor analysis works basically. And then there are three core postulates for characteristic adaptations. The first is as there's adaptation over time. So people adapt to the environment over time by developing patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors consistent with their personality traits and initial adaptation. So we basically adapt, adjust, making sort of adjustment over time. And then, but there's also adjustment, because sometimes a person's response is not aligned, and it's inconsistent with our personal goals or cultural values. So, yeah, for example, if again we move uh, someone from a collectivistic society move to a very individualistic uh, society, then they have to adjust. Yeah, so it's totally different from their cultural values. So maybe they are more social in the collectivistic society, and then they have to move to a place that they where they have to be independent and does not really think about what other people say. So there is this kind of maladjustment maybe at the very beginning of the adaptation process. And then the third core postulate for characteristic adaptation is plasticity. So basic traits change over time in response to biological maturation, environmental change, or deliberate intervention. So again, in contrast to the basic tendencies, the characteristic adaptations are more flexible. So that is represented in the plasticity postulate of the characteristic adaptation.